Hi, everyone. Happy Hour Live is here. We are back this summer, and we're so excited to be back. We've been gone for a while, working mom life, but we're happy to open up our summer series. And we have like a wonderful guest. This is like an amazing moment for us to have Dr. Nika White with us, joining us for our opening session to talk to all of you all about DEI in 2022. So
Yes.
thank you so much for sticking with us and joining us for this event. It's happy hour, so it's after work. And we get to kind of take off our corporate hats and really just talk about the subjects that you all are interested in, we're interested in, and just hear from experts. Literally, that's what Dr. Nika White is, an expert. This is her craft. This is something that she's been doing for a long time. As we kind of told you all in our bio, about this event. Dr. Nika White is an author. She's a DEI practitioner, just a consultant, you name it. She's all of those things, truly Black girl magic personified. So I want to swing it over to Dr. Nika White to kind of give you all an intro and tell you a little bit about herself. Thank you, Nika.
Oh, thank you so much, Camille and Carla. It is such a delight to be in conversation with both of you this evening. So glad you all are back bringing some wonderful content. And I am just thrilled that you thought of me to kick off your summer series. And so thank you so much. Again, I'm Dr. Nika White. My pronouns are she, her, and I have the honor of serving as the founder and lead principal consultant for a management consulting firm under my brand name, NWC for short. And we are a boutique consultancy where we intersect the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion with leadership and business, working with all types of clients all over the country, even clients with a global presence, helping them to integrate into their business framework, strategic diversity, a lens of inclusion and intentional inclusion and equity. So I am thrilled to be here and really look forward to rich conversation this evening with the HR twins.
Yes. Thank you so much. Really love the bio. You're doing some great work. You've been doing it for a long time, even prior to George Floyd's murder. But when you talk about integrating that strategic lens or framework into other corporations or employers or business practices, a lot of people, when they think of DEI, they just think about hiring, and that's it.
Mm.
What other things should people be looking at when they think about DEI? What besides hiring in business?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question, Carla. And I mean, the short answer is all the things. You really should not view DEI as something that's just very specific to one particular function of an organization. Yes, the people function, human capital is incredibly important. It's the greatest asset of organizations. But how are we helping the people, your greatest asset, to be able to show up at their best, to thrive, to have full opportunity for success? That has everything to do with the culture, has everything to do with the opportunities for upward mobility. So sponsorship, mentorship. Also, when we think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, it needs to be embedded into other processes. Like outside of the hiring, how are we marketing? How are we really making sure that our communication strategy is meeting the broad spectrum of diverse individuals that we're trying to reach? Even as it relates to our purchasing and procurement, are we thinking intently about who are those veteran-owned business, ethnic minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses that we want to have in our consideration set to make sure they have opportunities? So I often say that it's really important for organizations as they're attempting to integrate DEI into their business frameworks. We have to think about every aspect of the organization, really fully institutionalizing it so that then it can optimize the outcomes that many organizations are seeking.
Yeah,
Right.
that's definitely something we've seen pop up over the last couple of weeks. I'll give an example. And it's like, it's 2022. Why do these things keep happening, right? Just take, for example, Juneteenth ice cream at Walmart, right? Who wasn't in the room or who was in the room, right? DEI is so prevalent and such. People have kind of turned it into a buzzword or a buzz practice. And so it's like we see it, we hear it, and these big global corporations, it's like, what are you missing? So how can we, there's so many DEI practitioners since George Floyd. As you know, people just pop up and they're like, oh, I'm a DEI consultant. That's what I do.
Yes.
Because I'm Black or brown, or because I'm a woman, right?
Yeah.
So what is missing in this space, where as far as companies as well, where we're just like missing the mark on DEI when it comes to marketing and inclusion and all those things in business practices?
That is such a loaded question. And I appreciate the question, Camille, because it is a big conversation that is surfacing of late, because of course, Juneteenth is almost among us. We're in the middle of, we've just started Pride Month, and we're seeing it across so many national observances. And people are tired. You hear me? They are tired. They are seeing right through it. They are becoming triggered by the performative nature of how in which brands are trying to align with this broader movement and message. Mm-hmm. And it's missing the mark. I think that what's important for many organizations is to learn how to more intentionally and more effectively infuse the lens of DEI into every discipline. The same way that we just talked about how DEI should impact every aspect of an organization. Well, the same is true for every discipline. We have too many people that are, practitioners in their space. They know their craft, they know their trade, but they're saying, okay, when it comes to the DEI piece of how in which I execute this, I'm going to get the chief diversity officer or the HR manager or whoever's charged with the responsibility of DEI, rather than saying, is this now an opportunity for me to strengthen my skill sets, to certainly make sure that I have a depth of knowledge to be able to infuse that lens into the work that I do every single day. So let's bring it back to the examples we were just talking about, developing new products and brand messaging. How are we doing that in a way that's very respectful of the people that we want this message to resonate with? I don't know who was behind those closed doors when Walmart came up with that product, but I would not be surprised if there were even individuals who look like us, right? Black men and women. But here's what I also would question. Were those individuals in the room just simply because they are Black and brown? Or were they in the room because they also have a wealth of knowledge of how to now take something that needs to be really meaningful to this population? And how do we do that in a way that's certainly going to create the outcomes that we want? And that completely missed the mark.
Right. As a follow-up to that, and talking about like people just popping up and like they're knighting themselves as DEI practitioners. Yes. I know you've been doing this. You have the track record of this work. So tell our audience a little bit about how you actually got into diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging.
Oh, I love this story. I often say that this work found me. I didn't find it, although now hindsight, 20 years later, after being a practitioner in this space, what I realize is that I always had some level of connectivity to trying to amplify the voiceless, right? I really was always about advocating for those that I felt were marginalized and did not have the pathway of opportunity for success. And so my background is marketing communications. I spent a number of years working directly in that field, in that industry. I loved it. It was always about on time, on budget, on strategy, very fast-paced, very dynamic, but I was in my element. And I thought for the longest, I'm going to be in this space for the long haul. And I remember I was working for an agency at the time, and this agency was headquartered in Greenville, South Carolina, but also had an office in New York. So every so often I was in between both offices. And I remember I would go to New York and I would be envious of the diversity of the workforce, right? But what I also was aware of is that even the advertising capital of the world, like New York, was challenged with really trying to make sure that this industry was well represented by all types of people, right? And when you think about that from a marketing communications perspective, you want to make sure that you are a smart marketing partner to your clients whose consumer constituencies represent diverse America. So it begged the question of why aren't we as an industry doing more to help be intentional about creating that type of outcome? And I knew that if New York was challenged, the advertising capital of the world, right, with great level of diversity, then of course, Greenville, South Carolina, which is the agency that I was working for, was challenged because we weren't known for that type of industry.
Right.
So I had a really honest conversation with the president and CEO, who was very hands-on at the time. I had a good rapport with him. And I really just shared a similar narrative that I'm sharing with you. I knew that the BHAG, the Big Hairy Audacious goal, was to become the most admired agency in the Southeast. So my question was, if that's our goal, what are we doing? Why are we waiting for someone to knock on our door to place a mandate on us, which is what was happening in New York? They were knocking on the agency's doors and saying, you have to diversify. Our industry depends upon it. This is not a suggestion. It is a mandate. We'll be back in 6 months to see how you're doing. So if this is what it's going to take, why are we waiting for someone to place that mandate? Let's do it now. Right. And so at the end of that conversation, he asked very thoughtful questions, and I was prepared for every single one of them except for the last one, which was, now, Nika, I agree. We're going to do it. You're going to lead it. Now tell me how. But I did have the wherewithal to have really smart people in my camp that I could rely upon, that were doing some amazing things already in this space in their respective organizations. And so that's where my start began. And then I slowly but surely also matriculated towards other opportunities where I was able to do this work for many different organizations. And I then started planning my exit strategy, because I knew that there was another layer to this. And that layer was, I don't want to be confined and restricted. I want to make sure that I really can make impact and make a difference. And sometimes when you do this work internally for one singular organization, you may not have that agency. And that was important to me, because I have deep convictions about this work.
Wow. So I know that I'm going to ask you about the traits that it takes to do this work, or what traits you think makes you good at your job. One of them you already said, which is you believe that you know a part of your purpose is to have a voice for the voiceless. So aside from that, what else do you think, people should have doing this work, and what traits do you possess that make you good at your job?
Yeah, there are a couple of things that I point to. I mean, first and foremost, at the core, at the center of this work of DEIB, and I'll even put the J in there for justice, because all of it together collectively is critically important. Yeah. There has to be a heart for humanity, right? Because that's at the core of it. If we center humanity in all of these conversations and all of this work that we're doing, I think that's going to serve us as a society well. So we have to certainly have a mindset and a heart for caring for humanity. Right. Secondly, I think that intentionality is what I have seen separates a lot of organizations that do this work at a medium kind of, impact level versus those that operate at an exemplary level where they are sustaining the outcomes. And it's because when we are intentional, we really are thinking about what needs to happen at what point in time to make sure that we are really meeting the mark. And so you're identifying, what is that mark? What are those key strategic focus areas? What are the accountability mechanisms? What are the metrics of success, and how are we putting some intervention strategies in place to make sure that we're meeting the mark? And so I think that level of intentionality and strategic thinking, we can't solve for the work of DEI with a singular program or initiative. It has to translate into impact. Activity has start and end dates, and activity is vastly different from impact. Impact requires us to look at systems, policies, procedures, culture, and then put some accountability behind whatever the systems are that we're wanting to change, so that we can maintain that on for the future. The other thing that I will say that I think has served me well is that I have this keen sense of curiosity. It's actually one of our core values at NWC. We really seek to understand first, before we assume, before we react. I talk often about there's a difference between responding and reacting, right? When we're reacting, we're kind of in the moment. When we're responding, we should be exercising a lot of thoughtfulness, asking great questions, not just making definitive statements. And that's important as you're trying to solve for something, because it requires you to really spend some time in critical reflection, getting data, having thought partners, understanding really what the root causes are, peeling back all those layers, and then solving for it there. And so I really do believe that the asking of questions and constantly kind of interrogating a lot of what I may see or observe to understand the why behind it, I think that brings a certain level of intellect to this body of work that just can't be addressed with our emotions, right? We have to also be very strategic with it. So that's what I found has worked really well for me.
Awesome. And your background, definitely we can tell you come from a marketing and communications background, because
You can
listen,
tell that.
that salon is branded, everything branded. And
Yes.
I love it. And so I know you have a book of the name Intentional Inclusionist. Tell
Yep.
everybody what that is, and why thought it to be so significant and impactful doing
Yeah.
this work.
Well, thank you so much for giving me space to share about my book. It's the first book that I authored, and it is called The Intentional Inclusionist. But it's a guide for helping people to understand their sphere of influence and how to leverage that in order to foster diversity, equity, and inclusion in a way that really helps to be a part of this broader body of work. What I find is that there are a lot of people that if you were to engage them at their core, they can articulate the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion, but they're passive about it. And what I mean by that is they're kind of on the sidelines and they are seeking other people to do the work. It's almost like, this is important. I'm glad it's being done. But yes, woo, y'all go and do that, right?
Yeah.
Instead of what is my responsibility? So when I was writing that book, I really wanted to create a sense of ownership. And I wanted to bring clarity to the fact that doing this work belongs to all of us. It's not just about the person who wears the title of Chief Diversity Officer, Manager, Director, or even the HR professionals, because this work finds its way into the HR aspect of many organizations, rightfully so. But it is about what can each of us do within our sphere of influence. It could be in the workplace, in our families, in our homes, in our communities, right? And so I think that shift in mindset from seeing it as someone else's responsibility to my own is really the start of someone beginning to operate with an intentional mindset around fostering diversity, equity, and inclusion. So, yes, that was my first book, published actually several years ago now. And I'm, after that, I published book number 2, which is entitled The Next Level Inclusionist. It's all about taking it to the next level, right?
Yes.
And then I am now working on book number 3, which is in partnership with Forbes. Forbes Books is my publisher, and we are in the final editing stages now. It should be released later this year. I'm super excited about it because when I tell you that I have poured all of me into this book, there are stories, there are practical ways in which people can begin to engage in this work. We really help people to unlearn misinformation that they may be holding about this work that could be a cause of resistance. I often say that resistance is a lack of clarity, right? And clarity is kind. So I cannot wait for this book to be released. I feel that it is a really important step in my voice in this space as well. And so I'm excited to share it with the world.
That's
Awesome.
awesome. I know you have accomplished a lot. You're an author, you're a speaker, you do this work as a consultant, you help organizations and and also other individuals. And from Black women to another Black woman, we're so incredibly proud of you. And
Oh,
you've had lots of success, and we like to see, you shine in every way. But I want to ask you, what has been your biggest win doing this work? If it's a particular situation where you help the organization overcome something, and what has been your biggest challenge doing this work?
yeah. I'm one of those individuals that in the moment it's hard for me to utter these words, but I do believe in, failing forward. I do believe in seeing all situations as an opportunity, either for growth and learning or to build that momentum that may be needed to reinforce some behaviors or some practices that you really want to align yourself with. But this work is hard work. And so for me, I think it's been all about trying to balance centering myself and thinking about all of my intersecting identities as a Black woman founder of a DEI practice. I chose this career, or it chose me. Either way, we're now married here together as part of my purpose and my calling. But even when I think about some of the recent incidents, and if I think about, George Floyd's murder, we just celebrated the 2-year anniversary of his death, and the Buffalo shootings. As DEI practitioners, we also are triggered, especially as those who are part of those oppressed or historically marginalized identities. We are often triggered as well, but we still have to show up in that moment. So balancing all of that can be a big challenge. So, that's why you see a lot of talk about well-being and self-care and taking breaks and having a tribe that you can rely upon. And it's because this work is really heavy and it's really hard. But because we chose this work in this profession, when there are clients who are reliant upon us to help them navigate what to do to be there for their employees, we have to sometimes just put on that smile and keep going. And so I think that, the realization for me really hit after George Floyd, when I was traumatized, just like the rest of the world. It was so hard. It was so visual. It was on every, news media outlet. And I remember I was doing business as usual. I was, having my conversations, and there was a white male colleague that kind of reached out to me and said, "Nika, how are you doing?" And it was just business as usual. And I said, I just went straight into, "Hey, I'm doing well." And I just started talking about, what was on the docket for the day in terms of executing towards whatever elements that were in the statement of work at that time. And he paused and he said, "No, Nika, how are you? I see you." And in that moment, here I am, someone who sees myself as being very resilient, very much in control and grounded. And I broke. I broke.
Wow.
And it was just because of exhaustion. It was because of how much longer can I put on this facade and pretend that I'm not impacted by this as well? I am a mom of a Black boy. I am a wife of a Black man. I am a mom of a Black daughter who is just as much of an activist as I am, even more so. But I was carrying all of that. And I felt like I had to continue to suppress what I was feeling. And as a practitioner in this space, that's hard. So we're constantly challenging each other to take time where we need to and to honor the needs of our bodies so that we can show up at our best. So I think that has been a challenge, even this week, this week and last week. I have a colleague on my team that is going to be moving to Tulsa, and her family lives there. And currently she lives in Oklahoma City. And so, she said, I'm not in the right space of mind right now. I don't have the focus that I need. And we all just held space for her. When it hits home and in your backyard, it makes a big difference. And so that's one thing that I feel like I have to be ever present aware of, because if not, it certainly can impact my mental health. It certainly can impact how effective I am for showing up for my colleagues, for my clients, for my community, for my family, right? And even for myself, personally for myself. So yeah, that's a challenge.
Thank you for that. That is a challenge. And when you were like saying that, like I got misty.
Me too. I got misty. I'm like, you're gonna see this vein right here.
Yes. So it is, even though myself and Carla, we're not directly in the DEI practitioner space. Our roles still very much bear a weight of that work, because like you said, it's everybody's role, everybody's job. So yes, at that point, definitely it's even thinking about it gets emotional. But I want to talk about, because myself and Carla, we're of a particular age. And so back in the day, you did not talk about politics. You didn't talk about personal life. You didn't talk about like self-care and all of these things. Like nothing personal came to work with you. But I very much feel like this day and age, everything comes with you. It's a part of being a human being. And to say that you have to separate things that impact you personally from bringing it to work, it just like, if you have something emotional that happens in the world in your personal life, I mean, it's no way to kind of not bring that to work. But now it's just like supercharged politically, who's on what side of the aisle. Everything is made political and things like that, and it comes into the workplace. But how do and I love to give our audience takeaways. How do managers and leaders really manage the whole personal, political things that cross with DEI, anti-racism, all those things? How do you navigate that as a manager or a leader?
It's a great question. I think first and foremost, we have to realize that even the leaders that we're wanting to place this responsibility on are also dealing with their own things. And so I think first and foremost is we need to release leaders from feeling like they have to have the answer, because no one singular person and no one singular organization is going to be able to really undo years and years of harm that has already been deeply rooted into our systems and how it shows up. And so one of the first things that I tell individuals is that give yourself permission to not have to have all the answers, but also don't sit on the sidelines of silence, because silence is a message as well. And it's a message that is actually creating harm, because it is causing people to presume that you are out of touch, you are unaware, right? You don't care. There's a lack of empathy and compassion. So I think most and foremost is that we need to center humanity, right? In those moments where people are really troubled by so many different circumstances that are feeling out of their control, we need to hold space for that. We need to acknowledge it. But to pretend it's business as usual is perpetuating the problem. It is saying you don't see me. And if you don't see me, you can't value me. And if you don't value me, then is this a place for me? Can I thrive here? And so that sense of belonging, it certainly is about being in a space where people can feel safe to bring their authentic selves and to not have to always be on. What happens outside of the four walls of an organization certainly impacts how in which people show up to that organization.
It surely
So
does.
it's first and foremost the acknowledgement of it. And that can look like a multitude of things. Literally just having people to, in safe spaces, be able to process together. What are they hearing? What are they feeling? Providing a lot of grace during those moments too. Because people are not really operating at 100%. I know of a lot of organizations these days that are incorporating mental health days just to make sure that the whole organization can kind of take a step away so that people aren't feeling even the pressure of, okay, I'm going to take time for myself, but so is everyone else. And so I know that that's going to allow me to be okay with stepping away. So I think it's just being open about it. And one of the things that I love to encourage leaders to do is to start asking questions like, what does support look like for you in this moment? That is such an important question. What does support look like for you? Because we spend so much time assuming that we know how to support people, and we don't even have those lived experiences. We don't have those pain points, right? So instead of assuming, let's ask the question. And it may be that someone can't articulate it in that moment, but that's okay. The fact that you have extended yourself in that way is showing that compassion and that empathy. And that does wonders for people that may be sitting with something that could be causing them to be troubled in the workplace.
Absolutely. And the mental health day, I just take them. I tell my boss, hey, I'm taking my mental health Friday. I take random Fridays off. Nothing necessarily has to be going on, but especially if something's going on. And even when the 10 people were murdered in Buffalo, I really, my boss asked me how I was doing. Hey, I'm not doing good. I'm off focus. I'm kind of, I might be in and out. I think that people also, and like you said, the responsibility is not just on leaders and managers, but also as an employee. I think you should have the wherewithal to say, hey, Mr. Manager, hey, Miss Manager, I'm not doing well today. My focus is off. I need a day.
Exactly. Naming that and knowing that when you name that, you're going to be supported in it. And that's not to say that we need for everybody to expect for everyone just to abandon all their responsibilities. You communicate around that. But again, I think that's where the grace comes in. And we need to extend more of that right now because people are troubled. People are really, really troubled. And, we're seeing the numbers of COVID cases back on the rise. And so, we're holding a lot. And even as I think about the distributed workforce right now, where people are in hybrid situation or fully remote, that's creating a lot of complexities. And so organizational leaders really need to lean in and be very communicative about how do we now navigate this distributed workforce with the lens of DEIB, because that's critical as well. I say to so many people that when we think about belonging, I really have of late spent a lot of time centering belonging in this broader conversation, but it is hard for any person to show up at their best in any environment if they're always questioning whether or not they belong. Do I belong here? Am I valued? Am I seen and heard? Do I have full opportunity for success? Am I safe? If people are questioning those things, they're not showing up at their best. And so the recognition of the need to lean in more and be even more intentional about how do we now ensure this level of connectivity and this hybrid work environment is even more important.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I keep hearing you say DEIB, and one of my questions was going to be like, if you could rename DEI, because that's all we talk about, DEI, DEI,
Oh
DEI.
gosh.
Like,
Oh.
if you could rename it, what would that be?
Oh, that's such a good question. I've never been presented with that question before, but I will tell you, we have so many letters in the alphabet that's finding its way into acronyms to
Right.
describe and talk about this work. So I'm a believer of reimagining, reframing, especially if I feel like it's losing its power to where it's creating a challenge
Yes.
or a point of resistance for people to enter and engage. And so
Yes.
oftentimes I will say, okay, if these are trigger words for, leaders in your organization, for whatever reason, maybe they have misinformation that they're holding in mind, and it causes them to shun the words, or the effort or the movement, then let's talk about it differently. Let's reframe this to leveraging human difference and to valuing humanity, right? Sometimes instead of, I don't like the word training per se, because to me, it sounds like a destination. So in NWC, we always refer to it as learning and development experiences. But I've even said, if we need to label this as professional development, because then it connects the dot to what's in it for me as we're trying to expose people to deepen their knowledge and their awareness, then let's do that. And so I would say it will have to be maybe one of the things that I shared, either, valuing and centering humanity, or leveraging human difference, leveraging and valuing human difference. But yeah. I'm not opposed at all to reframing where it's necessary. But I will say this too. I'm also not a big fan of, at every turn, trying to name it something different because someone has become offended by what they think it is. I think that part of the resolve is that lack of clarity is what's causing that friction and that disconnection. So how do we fix that instead of trying to change the language and the words,
Right. I often in my conversations at work or with other groups when we're talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, I always talk to groups about, because this is everyone's work, not just the DEI director, not just the CEO. I always talk about creating diversity from the inside out. For me, it's getting out of your comfort zone. Everybody getting out of their comfort zone, being open to communication, honesty, and looking at others' viewpoints about certain things, and opening your network. So we talk a lot about referrals, but the referrals would benefit us if you would diversify from the inside out, and you say your whole friend group doesn't look the same. Like, what internal work are you doing to carry that diversity, equity, inclusion banner? And when you do it from the work from the inside out, it shows up where I'm referring not only another white male that looks like me, but my Black, Asian, Indian partners that I met at a conference last year and I kept in contact. What do you think about that, notion of diversifying from the inside out?
Well, I mean, I like it. I think it certainly places a level of onus on the individual, right? It causes us to spend some time and in our own personal, reflection of how am I showing up? What am I doing to help strengthen my inclusion muscle and to deepen my understanding? How am I building my network of individuals that are different from me so that I can learn from them and not just make assumptions, right? And so I think that's so important. So, what really you're referring to is this notion of cultural intelligence. How are we also exercising a level of humility to know that we don't know everything, right? So how curious are we going to be to try to figure it out, to try to learn more? And again, as you mentioned, kind of get out of our bubble and our circle. And so that is definitely a part of this journey. I often say it starts at the personal level. We can try to change organizations all day long, and we do need to. Let me be the first to amplify that. But you can't change organizations until you change the people in the organizations.
Right.
The people who are leading these organizations, they're the ones who are coming up with systems, policies, procedures. They're helping to set culture. They're modeling. So if they're setting the tone and leading the way, we have to make sure they get it at the personal level. So I love that looking inward connotation that you've shared today, Carla.
Yes. I wanted to know, like, because this work is very emotional and it's very personal, right? And you've been doing it for a long time. So is there at any point where you're like, I just can't do this anymore? Like it's too much. Have you ever felt
Yeah.
that?
I've never gotten to the point to where I wanted to walk away from the work per se, but I have certainly reached the point multiple times since I've been in this space where I have needed, it was very clear that I needed separation. I needed to step away, and I think that it comes with the territory, but it's also the realization, as I was mentioning before, of my own needs and recognizing that I have to also honor my body. If I see this as my purpose and my calling, then when I get to that point, the best thing that I can do is to try to create that separation. I also feel, though, that I do have a high tolerance of what I sense that maybe a lot of people that are not closely connected or don't see this maybe as their calling.
Mhm.
I've been told that I can be quite diplomatic in getting a very good point across when someone has come from the mouth wrong, in the presence of others in ways that could be harmful, but it just, and so I really do believe that part of my gift and what's in my wheelhouse is being able to navigate those conversations to where we leave people with dignity, but we also, along with that grace that we are extending, we're also making sure that there's a level of accountability. So I believe in calling in behaviors. We hear that language a lot, don't call people out, call in behaviors. And I would argue that there are some times where you do need to maybe call people out. But I think generally speaking, for me, I want people to do this work because of and not despite, right? Despite the work or in spite of. And so part of that requires us to quiet our egos sometimes, even as practitioners who want you to get it immediately, and to just reflect and ask questions and let the rapport that you're building through that relationship allow influence of your voice and really the mindset shift that you want to occur to then be transferred on to the individuals that you're trying to impact. In order for behavioral change to occur, people can't feel attacked, so I often talk about, I don't believe in guilting, shaming, or blaming. I believe in holding people accountable. I do believe in not diluting the work, but being honest with the work. But I also believe that sometimes you have to be willing to meet people where they are. Don't leave them there, but meet them where they are, so that once you meet them there, you're now establishing this influence to where you can go on this journey with them, right? You can go on this journey with them. And so at the end of the day, we need all of us to be concerned about this work. That is how we're going to be able to correct all of the ills of the world, is if all of us are involved. And so my philosophy, and I know this is not something that's a popular perspective of many practitioners, but my philosophy is that if you're willing to show me that there can be a mindset shift, and you haven't just dug your heels in and said, this is my lifestyle and this is what I believe, and you're not going to change my mind. If you're passive, or you're on the fence, or even you are still uncertain, but you're willing to engage, then I feel like there's a part of me that senses responsibility for those who have the emotional capital to do that, to help bring those individuals along, because we all are entering this conversation at different places within our learning journey.
Right. And that speaks to, I was gonna, you find things on social media, on Twitter, and Nika, you already kind of spoke to it. I was gonna present a tweet to you. Someone had put on Twitter about they called it so-called DEI work, and when can we stop meeting people where they're at? And so
Yeah.
I was like, wow, okay.
And let me say, that is real. That's the perspective of a lot of people. And what it says to me is that individual does not have the tolerance or the emotional capital, and maybe no, they do not have it. Maybe they just don't desire to exercise that. And that is a personal decision, I believe. For me, as a practitioner in this space, this is a purpose and a calling. And so I do believe that there are some steps that I am willing to take with individuals who are also trying to be on a path of changing and improving and being a part of the solution. But this work is not for everyone, just like, being a nurse, being a healthcare, provider, or practitioner is not for everyone. So we have to pick our lane, and we have to know and what we are setting ourselves up for, what we're willing to do and lean into. And so I don't have any negativity towards that perspective. That's that person's perspective. This is the beauty of diversity, right? I believe in there being two truths. It's possible that we have to sometimes hold the middle. There are both ands. And for that individual, it doesn't sound like that's what they're willing to do. And that's okay. I'm not going to judge that. But for me, I feel like I do have a deeper appetite to try to bring people along.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. And we're getting close to time. So before we ask you what you have going on in your area, a little fun question, since this is happy hour.
Yeah.
We're having the NBA finals now.
Oh, yeah.
My husband has been watching every night. So I want to know, who do you think's going to win the championship?
Here's the thing. I'm going to tell you who I want to win. I will refrain from answering who I think is going to win, because I don't want to jinx this, right? So I'm a Golden State Warriors fan. I want the Warriors to win. I do. But so like you, Carla, I've been watching the series with my husband. And I'll be honest, this is usually the only time that I do watch is when it gets to the finals, right? Otherwise, I'm like, okay, whatever. And I remember last night watching this game, and then it was like literally all of a sudden in fourth quarter, the Celtics got hot. And I was saying, they are hot. How did they turn this around like that? And we just lost control. And I'm saying we, because again, I'm a fan of the Warriors. But I still have faith that Steph Curry is going to pull it out and we're going to walk away with it in the end. At least that's my hope.
Awesome. Well, we definitely want to leave our audience with where to find you. We do have some HR leaders, people that own businesses, if they might be in need of your expertise, so if you could provide your information and like where they can find you, all of that jazz.
I will. So first and foremost, I want to say thank you to the HR twins. I am so excited to be in conversation with both of you. I had a chance to, of course, have you, Camille, on to my Intentional Conversations podcast. And that's when I learned that you had a twin. And I was like, oh my gosh, are you serious? So this was awesome. I love what you all are doing and how you're trying to take this conversation that could feel a little inaccessible to some people, and you're really making it practical and fun and conversational. So thank you both so much for letting me share on your platform. So where to find me? I think the best way is my website. I have two separate websites. One is for my consulting firm, and it's nikawhite.com. And then I also have one that's entitled nikawhitespeaks.com. It's like my speaking website. And on my website, you can find all of the information to contact me, including even following me on social media platforms. And so I would love to connect with this audience and to certainly be in conversations about any ways that I can assist you in the journey of deepening, again, the commitment to DEI.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Dr. Nika White. I've learned some things. I took notes just in case you were like, she's looking down. I had my pen and paper.
I love it.
Look, I've never heard of both and. I've heard of but not both and. So I wrote that down. I wrote the phrase cultural intelligence down, and leaders to make sure they ask, what does support look like in this moment?
For you. Yes. For you.
Yes. So they just don't assume.
Yes.
And so, I'm taking notes. I'm learning things. I hope you all did too. We want to thank our audience, LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, for joining us. We'll have more of these this summer, and you can reach out to us, our website, thecareersalon.com, Instagram, LinkedIn, the Career Salon, if you need to reach out to us for any reason. And we want you to have a great weekend, great Friday, and take care of yourself and stay safe. Yeah. All of it safe. So physically safe, psychologically safe, and all of that. So thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.